Before we get started today, I want to take a moment and recognize that as of posting this video, I have successfully posted a video every week this year since January 1, which was the goal I set for myself when I launched this channel. Now, granted, a couple of those videos were sort of phoned in, but nobody can be at their best all the time, so I'm just really proud that I met my goal. Starting at the beginning of 2025, which is next week, of course, I'm likely to switch to a bi-weekly posting schedule. I really enjoy making these videos, and I just like to keep it that way by not burning myself out. We're still just a one-person operation here, so it's like a little inside joke to myself when I use the word we, as if there were some kind of actual team happening here, but no. No, it's just us, and by us I mean me, and we're having tons of fun calling ourselves we. But that's enough patting ourselves on the back on your time. We'll have a little staff party later where we can tell ourselves how proud we all are of us, but I also want to thank all of you who have watched my videos. As of now, we don't have the largest viewership on YouTube, but the numbers say we have racked up about 30,000 total views, so to us, that feels totally worth continuing. Getting this message out to 30,000 people feels like a great use of our life energy. And so what we're trying to say here is how grateful we are to all of you who have watched. You really are the life's blood of this whole project, because without you, there would be zero reason to do this. So thank you. You are the best. Okay. I'm going to throw my arm out, patting myself on the back. So let's get on with the content. Today's video is going to be about the Mediterranean diet, plus a brief look at how I myself like to eat. Or is it we ourselves? I'm sorry, I just can't keep that going. It's too much. I mean, I'm just a person after all, you know? Anyway, the videos in this Diet Roundup playlist have followed a progression. I started with the worst of the worst and have been working my way up in general order to what I consider to be the healthiest. Seems a few feathers have been slightly ruffled along the way, and I expect that as these videos stay up and accumulate more views, I hope, more feathers inclined to ruffling will show up from time to time, and that's actually a good thing. As I've said before, I really want this to be a conversation, so there should always be room for divergent opinions, and that's also partly due to the fact that, believe it or not, I don't know everything, and I'm not always going to be right, so there you have it. That being said, I feel like I do have to make a quick comment on the comments. As much as I love seeing all kinds of opinions, I have to draw a line. If you say people are wrong or misinformed or even naive, that's okay, but don't call people stupid. If you think that someone is stupid just because they disagree with you, then maybe you're the one who needs to check yourself, and I will delete your comment. You can disagree with literally everything I say on this channel, and I will appreciate and like and even heart your comment no matter how much I disagree with it. But as soon as you start calling people insulting names, whether it be groups of people or individuals, I'm going to pull that down. Okay, that's enough of that bullshit. Let's get on with the fun food stuff. The Mediterranean diet is the last diet in the Diet Roundup series because by the numbers, this is the one that experts point to as having the best impact and outcomes for a number of health markers such as cancer risk, heart disease, obesity, and other metabolic disorders. There are also established correlations between this diet and cognitive function, depression, aging, and weight loss. Additionally, there are some indications that the Mediterranean diet supports kidney function and healthy gut flora due to the high fiber content. Now, of course, as you've heard me say before, correlation is not causation, but sometimes the correlation is just so obvious and overwhelming and supported by common sense that you need to give it some real consideration. I'd say without a doubt, the Mediterranean diet is worth consideration for the health benefits alone. Of all the diets we've looked at in this playlist, the Mediterranean has the most data in support of its health benefits. As I mentioned before, though, if there were as many studies on the Pegan diet, it might have comparable, if not superior numbers, but the fact is that the Mediterranean diet is the most thoroughly studied diet on Earth, and that's hard to compete with. Sorry, Mark Hyman. Love you, man. Actually, I've never met the guy, but I love his books. Love your books, man. Well, plus Mediterranean food, it's just delicious, which makes it really easy to stay with. Now, it needs to be said that the Mediterranean basin is a big place, and there isn't a single way that everyone eats, much in the same way that there was no single paleo diet ever in our brief history on this planet. One nutritionist whom I respect immensely, Christopher Gardner, once described the Mediterranean diet as a whole food, plant-based flexitarian diet. And he added that to make it really Mediterranean, you should finish each day with a shot of olive oil. Of course, he was joking. Sort of, mostly, I think, anyway. But I think that's a pretty good description. Not that you have to literally do shots of olive oil, but the Mediterranean diet is really, really heavy on this stuff. The Mediterranean diet, as we most commonly know it, is based largely on the foodways typical of people from southern Greece and Italy. It's not to be confused with Mediterranean cuisine, which is much more varied and includes everything from the Levant to southern France and beyond. When we talk about the Mediterranean diet, we're referring to a way of eating that has been studied and analyzed and dissected to an impressive extent. Some biologists in the 1970s were like, wow, look how healthy these people are. WTF are they eating? Well, it turns out they were eating mostly plants. Not all plants, mind you. They also eat a fair amount of fish and fermented dairy like cheese and yogurt. And as for those plants, there are a lot of unprocessed and minimally processed grains, legumes, and fruits and vegetables. They don't cut red meat altogether, but they do eat it rather minimally, and it is definitely not the centerpiece of their diet. Now, the various diets we've looked at in previous videos disagree with the Mediterranean plan for a variety of reasons. So, for instance, paleo doesn't like the legumes and grains. Keto adherents would say the Mediterraneans eat too much carbohydrate, and especially in the forms of fruits and grains. Vegans don't do the fish and dairy, and very many of them are not on board with the copious amounts of olive oil. A pecan follower might have some concerns about the pasta and the lack of restriction of starchy vegetables, though one of the great things about the pecan diet is its flexibility, so it's not like a pecan has to honor some kind of vow. Carnies won't touch any of those plants, and they have the LDL numbers to show for it. The amount of pasta and bread make the traditional Mediterranean diet all but impossible to follow for gluten-free folks, but there are some gluten-free mods out there, so it definitely can be done. Breatharians just have to say no, 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 and a resounding no right up until they exit either their diet plan or the world at large. Oh God, they have no idea what they're missing. The Mediterranean diet is practically indulgent. There is so much delicious food in there that a person on this planet is not going to miss a thing. They're just going to love every minute of it. And that brings up an important point. Critics of the Mediterranean plan point out that there is more to Mediterranean people's longevity than just the food. They are very social and really celebrate their relationships with their families and friends. They move their bodies and don't lead sedentary lives. It's been pointed out that in Sardinia, for example, which is a blue zone in Italy, there's stairs like everywhere, and even really old people climb a lot of stairs just as a part of their everyday lives. So think about it. Think about a person who eats really healthy food and then climbs a bunch of stairs to spend time with a loved one. If that person lives a long, healthy, happy life, it's hardly mysterious. But it does make it a little less certain as to how much of their health is the olive oil, how much of it is the stair climbing, and how much of it is the loved one at the top of the stairs. Now, as for me, I'm of a mind that all of those things are part of the recipe for a long, happy, healthy life, but for the purposes of this channel, we're here to talk about the food, and there is a lot to talk about. As with all the other diets, there are a few variations of the Mediterranean diet, but most of them agree on a handful of recommendations, beginning with olive oil. Like I said, this is where we lose a lot of vegans who have concerns about too much fat, but every variation that I know of the Mediterranean diet I've ever seen just lets you go wild with this stuff. And heck, even our old friend Steve Gundry actually and literally drinks shots of the stuff while pointing out that it contains chemical precursors that your body can turn into vitamin C. They all enjoy moderate amounts of seafood, poultry, egg, and a little red wine here and there. They all eat a limited amount of red meat and very little processed meat, and sweets and refined carbs. To put a visual on it, check out this Mediterranean food pyramid. It actually puts at the base physical activity and good relationships. Next to that is the importance of water, followed by fruits, vegetables, and whole grains, and then nuts, seeds, olives, herbs, and spices, followed by a little dairy, which some people say should be low-fat, while others simply suggest selecting goat and sheep over cattle. So, there's room for interpretation there. Above the dairy is fish, poultry, eggs, and legumes, followed by potatoes, red and processed meat, and finally, we get to a very sparse intake of sweets and red wine. Now look at this graphic that compares the Mediterranean pyramid with the standard American diet. They are almost exact mirror images of each other. If you currently eat the standard American diet, you could basically just flip your food choices literally upside down, and you would have the diet that many consider to be the very healthiest diet ever. Kind of makes you think, huh? Some studies show that upwards of 40% of the standard American diet is refined carbs and sugar. Even on my worst day, I don't eat like that. Now, the red wine thing needs a little attention because there is some debate around it. If it has an actual utility in the diet, experts have divergent opinions as to why. One thing you hear a lot is that the thing that makes red wine healthy is a compound called resveratrol that's found in grapes and especially red grapes. But here's the rub. In order to get the 500 milligram dose that can do you much good, you would need to drink 40 liters of wine every day, and I think we all agree that nobody who drinks 40 liters of wine every day is going to live very long. Other folks say that the psychological and emotional impact of sharing a glass of wine with a loved one is the magic sauce more than the actual sauce itself. Now, as for me, I'm not a heavy drinker, so I have to get my magical chemicals from a pill. And if you do decide to take a resveratrol supplement, make sure to get trans resveratrol as it's more bioavailable. Now, speaking of beverages, I just realized that I haven't talked once during this whole playlist about something very important. Please note that all of these diets recommend that you cut sugary beverages from your menu. I didn't mention it before because it just seems so obvious to me, and I lost my taste for that stuff years ago. Just know that there is zero health benefit from soft drinks whatsoever, whether they're sweetened with aspartame, stevia, high fructose corn syrup, or pure organic regenerative cane sugar. And it doesn't matter what kind of magical health benefits they put on the label. It doesn't matter if it's loaded with vitamins, antioxidants, miracle molecules, or real juice. None of those sweetened beverages do you any good, regardless of the hype they put on the label. None. Zero. And all those techno ingredients, they're pure nonsense. Some people have actually seen measurable health improvements by making just the one change of eliminating soft drinks and sugary beverages. Now, obviously, you can do what you want, but just be advised, there is zero dietary benefit from drinking pop. None. And unlike wine, the jury is not out on this. It's unanimous. Wine, on the other hand, well, the jury is very much out, but I think it's a well-received notion that a glass or two of wine per week can be a good thing, and especially if shared with friends. But there's a lot more to love about the Mediterranean diet than just a glass of wine. Take a look through one of their cookbooks and you'll see what I mean. Pesto, fish, homemade pita, falafel, hummus, shakshuka, cucumber, tomato salad, tabbouleh, baba ganoush, salmon, cod, and halibut, souvlaki, tzatziki sauce. And the list goes on and on. Make no mistake, the Mediterranean diet is nothing short of decadent. It was gestated by and for people who love life. This is a high-fat, high-flavor, high-joy, hedonistic diet. Even note that the processed meat recommendation isn't zero, it says limited amounts, which to me means sprinkling some prosciutto on my salad or building up a sauce from some pancetta fond, right? I mean, if you've never had a prosciutto and arugula pizza, let that be your homework assignment. Once you try a slice of that, you'll see why nobody, absolutely nobody eating Mediterranean food is ever going to miss a thing. If some diets are hard to stay with, this one is hard to resist. I'll tell you, while I was writing this episode for the first and only time during this whole Diet Roundup series, I felt really serious about actually going on this thing. Not because I feel like I need to fix my food ways, but just because the food looks so incredible. In fact, here's my challenge to you. If right now there's a little voice in your head saying, I wonder if I should check this one out, then I dare you. I double dog dare you. I super duper double dog dare you to go to the bookstore and look through a Mediterranean recipe book and not want to eat like every single thing you see. I mean, it turns out that the diet with possibly the best health markers ever studied is also incredibly delicious and intuitive. So that might have to be a hard yes, even for me. And that, my gentle viewer, is what you call a perfect segue. The second part of this video is supposed to answer the question, for what it's worth, how do I eat? Well, as with a lot of these diets we've been discussing, the answer is not simple. I don't follow any diet per se. I learn a little bit from each one of them in terms of how various ways of eating affect my health and well-being. If there is one rule in my diet, it's that I try to eat healthy food. Similar to the vegan philosophy, I think the most important thing is to eat high-quality ingredients. I'm not perfect, of course. I mean, far from it. In fact, I think that a lot of what makes a food healthy is how you feel about it. If you're going to cry into your kale and quinoa, then you should rethink your choices. You have to love what you eat, and if that means that every now and then, and I do mean every once in a great while, you let yourself get some French fries from the drive-thru, then do it. It shouldn't be a regular thing, obviously, and the fact is, the less junk food you eat, the less you like it. Well, maybe not French fries, but I've all but lost my appetite for sugary sodas. I still like a lot of other things, though, like especially those Asian snacks I reviewed a few months ago, and especially the curry puffs and the ma-la potato chips, but those are a rare treat, not a regular thing. Now, quite possibly the most useful nutrition advice I've ever heard is the oft-cited Michael Pollan quote, "Eat food, not too much, mostly plants." If you can follow those 3 simple rules, you'll do pretty well. The first item on that list might seem superfluous, but it's not. If you read his books, you'll find that he spends a lot of time differentiating between food as opposed to food-like substances. And by that, he generally means ultra-processed, chemically separated, and reconstructed high-tech versions of things. I tend to steer away from any food that has a label that screams keto-friendly, or gluten-free, or whole-30, or worst of all, low-fat. 9 times out of 10, the ingredient lists on those things are frightening. You have to ask yourself, okay, so it's low-fat. What did they put in there to make it so highly palatable to make up for the fat? Most of the time, it's refined sugars and some combination of unpronounceable chemicals. I mean, seriously, you'd have probably been better off with the fat that they removed. And let's face it, removing that fat was likely done by some diabolical industrial process that would make the Apollo mission look simple. As for me, I try to make my food out of things that don't even have an ingredient list. An apple doesn't have an ingredient list because it's an apple. A chicken is made out of 100% chicken. And the same goes for herring and broccoli. And I'm not saying that I only eat one thing at a time. That would be very boring. But the things that I make are made out of simple things. There's only one ingredient in the cabbage that I turn into kimchi. There's only one ingredient in the chicken that I turn into bone stock. You see what I'm saying? Now, I have more than a couple of guilty pleasures. I'm a veritable connoisseur of chips and salsa. I eat more ice cream than I'm willing to admit on camera. And as for those times when I've just hit a wall energy-wise, I do keep a frozen dinner on hand for emergencies, but they are not at all the cornerstone of how I eat day to day. I tell you, though, there is something really ironic about putting so much of my life energy into creating a channel about food that I sometimes have to skip cooking, and that irony is not lost on me. Not at all. But healthy eating is so much easier than it sounds. If you haven't seen it yet, check out my fast versus food video where I timed a trip to the drive-thru versus just making a simple salad at home. The salad wasn't just faster, it was incredibly faster. It wasn't even close. A lot of times I just make a quick stir fry that hardly takes 15 minutes. Next year, I'll try to do more fast, easy, healthy, cheap videos to give you more ideas on how to do, fast, easy, healthy, cheap. If I could recommend just one thing that you could do to get you on that track, it would be making your own chicken stock. Chicken stock can be turned into so many other things and pretty much quadruples the value of buying a whole chicken. And yes, I do eat a fair amount of chicken. You got a problem with that? As for how I choose what exactly to make, if you haven't yet, make sure to watch my video on nutritional wisdom and the joy factor. It turns out that there is really solid science to suggest that your body already knows what it needs. And if you learn how to listen, you can probably make really good choices and enjoy it immensely every bite and every step of the way. And remember, eat something delicious and you win because you make the food and then the food makes you. So, the two most impactful factors in what I choose to eat are first and foremost, I eat healthy things. I would never let a diet tell me to not eat cabbage because it's so well documented that cabbage is incredibly good for you. Same goes for beans, fatty fish, nuts, regeneratively pastured animal products, cocoa, quinoa, honey, black rice, fruit, and carrots, and the people who tell you to not eat those things are flat wrong. So I ask my body, which of the long list of healthy foods does it want today? And I listen to that. If my body tells me something insipid like French fries, I still try to interpret even that. What is in there that my body wants? Is it the potatoes, the starch maybe, the fat, the salt, the potassium? Okay, if so, then what else can scratch that itch that doesn't come from the drive-thru? Chilled potato salad maybe? Roasted root vegetables with olive oil and sea salt? A little imagination can go a long way, and that's how I eat. I guess you could call it intuitive, but I sometimes feel like that word might be a little overused. So maybe call it gut instinct. Anyway, that's what's worked for me for years and years. Your mileage may vary. I'm just not great at following a program. For me, it makes more sense to learn about the attributes of various foods and then take those into consideration when I decide what to eat. But I will say this without hesitation. If I were going to recommend one diet for just about nearly anyone, it would hands down be the Mediterranean. Depending on the person, it might need a little tweaking if, for instance, you can't eat gluten, in which case you're probably already aware that you need more B vitamins, fiber, and minerals, and especially iron for women. But for just about anyone else, this is a great way to go, even compared to paleo, vegan, and possibly pegan. This also might not work for you if you hate being healthy and love listening to nonsense, in which case you might consider breatharianism or cotton balls. One thing Mediterranean is categorically not, it is not a quick fix. It is not a miracle that fixes everything like, say, apple cider vinegar. This is a diet for your long-term health, and you would do well to consider the whole lifestyle, walking more and seeking human connection and, maybe taking naps. That is if you like that sort of thing. But all that being said, I think it needs to be repeated at least one more time. I am not an MD or a PhD. I'm a foodie and a YouTuber, and we all know what that means, right? I'm a foodie and a YouTuber, and there are already way too many foodie YouTubers out there dispensing nutrition advice, and, well, do not trust foodie YouTubers to be the final arbiters of solid nutritional advice. Speaking of YouTube, I have really enjoyed this past year, and thank you again for being a part of it. If you'd like to help me keep this thing going, you can do all the smashing of all the buttons, the like button, the subscribe button, the comment button, the share button, all the buttons. They all tell the almighty algorithm that this type of content is something we should continue. As I look over how different videos performed over the year, it seems like the subjects that did really well were how to build self-watering grow beds, how to roast a chicken, and the food history stuff. So as I think about what 2025 is going to look like, those are categories I'll probably do more of, so you can look forward to more how-to in general, including more fast, easy, healthy, cheap ideas, yardstead projects, and more about the next few food revolutions, which will bring up to the current revolution which you are a part of just by watching this channel. Another topic that did well for me was the steak throwdown, where I did a blind taste test of a factory steak versus a locally pastured steak, and the local steak knocked it out of the park. Weirdly, though, the same experiment with chicken didn't get nearly as many views. Weird. Did you hear that, YouTube algorithm? You are weird. Ooh, I should be careful with that. Anyway, people also seem to like the episode on ultra-processed food, which I think is a pretty important topic, so I'll be sure to talk more about the food industry, including what Michael Pollan calls the corn-CAFO complex, which is just so fascinating and utterly germane to our lives at present. If there were topics this year that you'd like me to do more of, please let me know and I'll get on that. So far, I've had a request on how to make a pan gravy and one request to do a video on honey, and both of those topics sound utterly delicious, so I can't wait. But for now, it's time to wrap up this video and this year. Thanks so much for watching. I hope to see you next time, and I hope to see you next year. Ciao.